Margaret, a 59-year-old woman living alone in her cozy Oregon home, had grown accustomed to the quiet rhythm of her days, tending her garden, preparing meals, and enjoying the peace that came with a long-established routine. Yet beneath the calm, she often felt a subtle ache of loneliness, a longing for connection that she rarely acknowledged. And on one ordinary afternoon, while arranging fresh flowers in her sunlit kitchen, a sharp knock at the door startled her, making her heart skip a beat because she wasn't expecting anyone. And when she opened it, she found a young delivery man standing there with a small package in hand, his youthful energy and polite smile immediately catching her off guard. And for a brief moment, Margaret felt a flutter of emotion she hadn't experienced in years, a mix of surprise, curiosity, and a hint of excitement, because there was something disarmingly genuine about his presence, the way he greeted her warmly yet respectfully, and the way his eyes met hers with a spark of attentiveness, as if he were truly seeing her rather than just completing a delivery, and their brief conversation began with routine pleasantries. The package, the address confirmation, and a polite exchange about the weather, but quickly took on a lighter, more personal tone when he made a small joke about the tricky path to her door, causing Margaret to laugh softly, the sound feeling unusually vibrant and alive in the quiet afternoon. And she noticed how the young man, named Ryan, responded with an easy smile that seemed to convey genuine interest in her reaction. And for a few moments, the ordinary world outside, the sun-dappled street, the chirping birds, the gentle breeze, faded as they stood together in a small bubble of shared attention. And Margaret realized that the impact of this simple encounter was stronger than she expected, leaving her heart beating a little faster, her thoughts lingering on his presence, the warmth in his demeanor, and the effortless way he had engaged her in conversation, making her feel unexpectedly alive. And as she accepted the package, their hands brushed, an innocent contact, yet it sent a subtle wave of emotion through her, reminding her how rare it was to feel truly noticed and appreciated, even briefly, and she found herself smiling after he left, the door closing behind him with a soft click, and she lingered in the hallway, reflecting on the encounter, replaying his easy laughter, his polite attentiveness, and the spark of energy he had brought into her otherwise quiet day. Realizing that the unusual situation, a simple delivery turning into a moment of emotional connection, had awakened feelings she thought long dormant, feelings of curiosity, joy, and the quiet thrill of unexpected companionship. And Margaret felt a gentle stirring of anticipation for the next time she might see him, wondering how such a brief, ordinary event could leave such a vivid impression on her. And she recognized that life had a way of creating small, unexpected moments that could carry enormous emotional weight, teaching her that even in the mundane routines of life, the presence of another person, their warmth, humor, and attention could create a lasting impact. A moment that lingered in memory, reshaped her perception of the day, and reminded her that connection, even fleeting and subtle, was a powerful, essential part of being alive. And as she returned to her daily tasks, watering the plants and arranging the kitchen, she felt a renewed sense of energy, a lightness in her step, and a quiet appreciation for the unpredictable magic of human interaction, understanding that this young delivery man had done more than deliver a package. He had delivered a reminder of vitality, attention, and the unexpected joys that could emerge from ordinary encounters, leaving her with a heart open to the possibilities of new experiences, connection, and gentle surprises that life could bring when one least expected it. And Margaret's thoughts continued to circle around that afternoon, the nervous excitement, the flutter of her pulse, the laughter and the politeness, and she realized that sometimes the smallest gestures, the briefest interactions, could spark an emotional awakening, setting the stage for reflection, personal growth, and the quiet discovery of renewed emotional depth in her life. And as evening approached, she found herself looking forward to the next delivery, not out of expectation for romance, but from a genuine desire for interaction, curiosity, and the gentle warmth that Ryan's presence had unexpectedly brought into her day, creating a sense of anticipation, connection, and emotional richness that made this first part of the story unforgettable. Over the next several days, Margaret found herself thinking about Ryan far more often than she had expected, replaying their brief encounter in her mind, remembering the easy way he had smiled, the politeness mixed with warmth in his voice, and the subtle spark of energy that had surprised her in such a quiet moment. And she noticed that her routine, once predictable and solitary, now felt slightly more vibrant, filled with a quiet anticipation for the next delivery, and when the doorbell rang again, her pulse quickened. A flutter of excitement she hadn't experienced in years, and opening the door to find Ryan standing there with another package, she felt that same mix of surprise and delight, his youthful presence filling the threshold with energy and light. And as they exchanged greetings, she noticed the genuine interest he displayed in her small observations, from the flowers blooming in her garden to the neatness of the porch, and she found herself talking more freely than she normally would, sharing little details about her life, memories from her youth, and stories of her late husband. And Ryan listened attentively, nodding and smiling in ways that made her feel heard and appreciated, a feeling she had long missed. And, as he handed over the package, their fingers brushed lightly again, innocent but charged with a subtle emotional resonance that Margaret couldn't ignore. And she realized with surprise that these brief interactions, no longer than a few minutes each, were awakening feelings she had almost forgotten: curiosity, excitement, and a gentle warmth toward another person. And over time, each visit became a small ritual, the anticipation building as she prepared a brief chat, arranging her day so that she could be outside when he arrived, noticing the way sunlight caught his hair or the sound of his voice in casual conversation. And she found herself observing his reactions to her stories, delighted by the way he laughed at her humor, asked thoughtful questions, and responded with interest rather than distraction. And Margaret reflected on how rare it was to experience such attention and connection, how a simple delivery could turn into an emotional touchstone, reminding her that even small, ordinary encounters could carry immense significance, sparking reflection on her own vitality, emotional needs, and desire for meaningful human connection. And she began to see Ryan as more than just a delivery man. He represented a bridge to unexpected joy, a spark of life that reminded her she was still capable of feeling surprise, curiosity, and emotional engagement. And she marveled at the gentle way these encounters rekindled her sense of aliveness without crossing boundaries, safe, respectful, calm, and entirely platonic, yet carrying a richness and emotional intensity she hadn't felt in years. And each time she watched him leave, closing the door behind him, she felt a lingering warmth, a smile tugging at her lips, and a heart that seemed lighter and more open than it had in a long time. And Margaret realized that this unusual situation, being moved by the presence of a young man in such a brief, mundane context, was teaching her to embrace unexpected joy, the quiet power of connection, and the subtle ways life could infuse her days with renewed emotional depth, anticipation, and delight. And as the week progressed, she found herself looking forward to these encounters, not out of expectation for romance or anything inappropriate, but for the human energy, warmth, and attentiveness Ryan brought, each visit reinforcing her sense of self, curiosity, and emotional resilience. And she noticed subtle changes in herself: more laughter, more reflection, more mindfulness of small pleasures in her day-to-day life, and a heightened appreciation for her own capacity to engage with others meaningfully. And with each interaction, the unusual situation deepened, revealing the richness of emotional life available in the simplest acts of human presence, from shared smiles to attentive listening. And Margaret understood that these fleeting moments carried the potential to transform ordinary routines into experiences filled with reflection, joy, and subtle emotional intimacy, strengthening her appreciation for small kindnesses, shared attention, and the gentle thrill of being noticed and understood. And by the end of the week, she felt a quiet anticipation whenever the doorbell rang, a mix of excitement and gratitude, a sense of emotional renewal, and a recognition that life could surprise her in ways both respectful and profound. And she reflected on how Ryan, simply by performing his job with kindness, attentiveness, and warmth, had sparked an awakening in her heart, a reminder that human connection, no matter how brief or unexpected, carries the power to illuminate our lives, encourage introspection, and cultivate joy. And Margaret knew that this unusual situation, her growing emotional engagement with a young delivery man, was teaching her lessons about presence, vulnerability, and the quiet beauty of shared attention. Lessons she would carry forward, grateful for the unassuming ways that life could remind her of the richness, warmth, and subtle excitement that connection with others could bring. Leaving her eager for the next encounter, reflective about her own emotions, and deeply appreciative of the gentle, unexpected shift in her otherwise predictable days. As the days passed, Margaret noticed how much Ryan's visits had become a highlight in her otherwise predictable routine, and each time the doorbell rang, a flutter of anticipation rose in her chest, a curious mix of excitement and warmth that reminded her how alive, small, human connections could make someone feel. And she reflected on the way her life had shifted subtly but meaningfully since that first delivery, realizing that a brief encounter, polite and innocent, had opened a window to emotions she had long neglected. And when Ryan arrived with yet another package, his smile bright and sincere, she felt a surprising sense of relief and joy, the ordinary act of receiving a delivery now carrying layers of emotional resonance, because in these short interactions, she discovered laughter, genuine interest, and a sense of being seen, which she had missed deeply, and their conversations, though simple, comments on the weather, small talk about her garden, observations about neighborhood life, felt layered with significance, each exchange building trust, familiarity, and emotional comfort. And she noticed herself sharing more of her thoughts and stories, memories of past joys and minor regrets, reflections on her children and her late husband, and Ryan responded with a kind attentiveness, listening patiently and offering thoughtful, respectful remarks, which made Margaret feel understood and appreciated in ways she hadn't expected. And as he handed her the package, their hands brushed lightly, a subtle, innocent gesture, yet one that carried a gentle warmth, sending a quiet thrill through her. And she realized that these fleeting moments were teaching her the quiet power of presence, attention, and human connection, showing her that even small, mundane events could leave lasting emotional impressions. And over the following days, Margaret began anticipating each visit with a mixture of curiosity, gratitude, and gentle delight, arranging her schedule to be available when deliveries arrived, finding herself noticing details she had long ignored, the changing sunlight on the porch, the blooming flowers, the sound of birdsong, and sharing these observations with Ryan, who responded with attentiveness and kindness, reinforcing the emotional bond she felt growing between them. And she marveled at how a simple delivery man, through ordinary acts performed with thoughtfulness and warmth, had sparked an emotional awakening within her, reminding her of the joys of companionship, of being noticed, and of experiencing human interaction in a way that felt both safe and profound. And in quiet moments after he left, she replayed the conversations, laughter, and gestures in her mind, feeling a mixture of reflection, amusement, and a tender emotional stir that left her heart lighter and her thoughts brighter. And she noticed changes in herself, an increased sense of joy, a curiosity about small details in daily life, a readiness to notice the warmth in ordinary interactions. And she realized that Ryan's presence, though brief and professional, had become a source of emotional vitality, reminding her that even small human connections could carry unexpected depth, and she appreciated how his respectful, engaging demeanor created a space where she could reflect on her own feelings, reconnect with a sense of vibrancy, and enjoy the quiet thrill of shared attention, understanding that this unusual situation, her growing emotional engagement with a young delivery man, wasn't about romance or impropriety, but about the awakening of joy, curiosity, and a renewed appreciation for life's subtle pleasures. And as she prepared for the next day's delivery, arranging the porch and tidying her home with small attentions, she felt a lightness in her step, a gentle excitement in her thoughts, and a quiet gratitude for the way these interactions had shifted her perspective, leaving her more aware of the beauty, connection, and emotional richness that even brief, respectful encounters could provide. And Margaret understood that life often surprises people in the smallest ways, teaching them that attention, warmth, and presence from another person, even a stranger performing a routine task, could awaken emotions, inspire reflection, and create moments of unexpected, gentle joy. And as the sun set that evening, she sat quietly with a cup of tea, thinking of Ryan's visits, smiling at the simple memories, and realizing that the unusual situation had created a rare and valuable opportunity for emotional connection, human warmth, and a reminder that life's smallest moments can have the deepest impact, leaving her heart open, her mind reflective, and her spirit quietly uplifted by the subtle, powerful effect of unexpected companionship, the kind that turns ordinary days into experiences filled with meaning, curiosity, and a soft, lasting joy that she would carry forward in her life. By the time a full month had passed, Margaret realized just how much Ryan's visits had changed her days, how the simple act of receiving a delivery had evolved into a meaningful ritual that brought warmth, laughter, and reflection into her otherwise quiet life. And she found herself eagerly anticipating the soft knock at the door, a flutter of excitement in her chest that reminded her how alive even small interactions could make her feel. And when Ryan appeared that day with his usual cheerful smile and polite greeting, Margaret felt a surge of gratitude, not just for his kindness, but for the way his presence reminded her of her own vitality and capacity for connection. And as she invited him briefly inside to place the package, they spoke easily about minor events in the neighborhood, the changing seasons, and small anecdotes from their lives, and Margaret noticed the gentle attentiveness in his eyes, the way he listened as if her words mattered, and she realized that these brief, respectful moments were teaching her lessons about the power of presence, the importance of noticing and appreciating human connection, and the quiet thrill of shared attention. And over the course of that week, she reflected on how unusual it was that a young delivery man could awaken feelings of joy, curiosity, and emotional engagement in her heart, reminding her that life's smallest moments often carried the richest significance. And as Ryan handed over another package, their hands brushed lightly, an innocent gesture that nonetheless carried a subtle, comforting warmth, and Margaret felt a quiet thrill, realizing that these small acts of kindness and attention had sparked an emotional renewal, bringing laughter, reflection, and a renewed appreciation for the ordinary. And she began sharing more of her own thoughts and experiences with him, speaking openly about her hobbies, memories, and even small regrets, while Ryan responded with genuine interest and thoughtful comments, reinforcing a sense of connection and mutual respect that felt both safe and emotionally enriching. And as the week turned into another, Margaret noticed changes in herself. She smiled more easily, appreciated small details in her day, reflected more on her own feelings, and felt a lightness in her step that had been absent for years, all thanks to the unusual situation of finding warmth, attention, and human connection in an unexpected place. And she realized that Ryan's visits were teaching her to embrace the unpredictability of life, to remain open to joy, and to recognize that emotional richness could appear in the simplest interactions, provided one was attentive and willing to engage with openness. And even after the delivery man left her doorstep, Margaret felt the lingering effect of their encounters, a sense of fulfillment, emotional clarity, and subtle excitement that brightened her days and reminded her of the beauty in human interaction, and she reflected on the lessons she had learned. That connection is powerful, that attention and kindness matter, and that life's surprises can spark joy, curiosity, and emotional growth. And she recognized that these feelings were not fleeting, but had planted a seed of awareness, gratitude, and emotional presence that would continue to enrich her daily life. And as she prepared for the evening, sipping tea and looking out at her garden, Margaret felt a quiet contentment, knowing that the unusual situation, a young delivery man bringing not just packages but attention, warmth, and subtle joy, had transformed her experience of ordinary days into something meaningful and memorable, a reminder that connection, however brief or unexpected, carries the power to awaken the heart, illuminate the spirit, and turn simple moments into lasting memories, and she knew that this experience had deepened her appreciation for life, for attentiveness, for shared human presence, and for the unexpected ways in which joy and emotional richness can arrive, leaving her with a sense of fulfillment, a renewed curiosity about others, and a quiet hope that life would continue to bring small, meaningful surprises, reminding her that even in the simplest encounters, there is potential for reflection, emotional growth, and gentle happiness. And as the night settled over her home, Margaret smiled softly, her heart full, and her spirit light, and her mind reflecting on how the unusual situation had become an unforgettable chapter in her life, teaching her that moments of kindness, attentiveness, and connection, even when delivered by a young stranger performing his job, can leave a lasting imprint, enrich the soul, and remind one of the extraordinary power of human interaction to create joy, emotional resonance, and cherished memories.